During the Great Depression, more than 2 million Americans hit the rails in search of food, work, or simply the next sunrise. These weren't romantic drifters. They were people who had lost everything and learned to survive through knowledge, resourcefulness, and a code that helped them navigate a world where every day was a test of grit. Their survival wasn't luck. It was built on a set of scavenging tricks so refined that many modern survivalists still use versions of them without realizing where they came from. And, the deeper you look, the more you realize how much practical intelligence was packed into every mile they walked. These weren't desperate wanderers, but adaptive strategists who built networks, read landscapes, and understood people with an accuracy that still impresses historians today. Stick with this guide, because you're about to learn the genuine field-tested methods that kept Depression-era hobos alive. And you'll also learn how to apply some of these principles in your own life and backyard survival setups. Now let's get into the real techniques. So, understanding how hobos used reading the land skills to find resources was really key. For Depression-era hobos, scavenging began long before they ever reached a town or a farm. Honestly, it all started by reading the land, much like a modern tracker would. Rail lines, you see, were the lifelines of the era, and hobos learned to identify what types of resources clustered around certain sections of track. Industrial spurs, more often than not, had scrap piles, broken crates, or even discarded food containers. These were places where a sharp eye could spot something useful, Sidings near rural towns usually meant livestock feed spilled grain, or access to leftover produce from nearby farms. For someone travelling the rails, these were important signs, little clues that could make all the difference. A practiced hobo could tell, just from the condition of the trackbed and the sound of the surrounding environment, whether they were approaching a place worth checking. One way you can apply this today is by training yourself to read resource clusters in your own local environment. Walk through your town with a historian's eye and a survivalist's mindset. Industrial zones tend to have pallets and usable scrap wood. Older neighbourhoods often have fruit trees that overproduce and drop more than residents gather. The practice isn't about trespassing, it's about pattern recognition, an ability the hobos use constantly. Developing an eye for unnoticed abundance is the first step to becoming resource literate. So, explaining how hobos mastered the art of food salvage without getting sick. Food scavenging wasn't just some random digging. Hobos practiced strict rules to avoid illness, because, getting sick on the rails could be absolutely fatal. They learned which restaurants put out scraps, at which times, which households routinely threw away edible leftovers, and which farms were willing to offer blemish produce in exchange for a few minutes of labour. These weren't handouts. These were survival exchanges based on observation and timing. Hobos also understood shelf life in a way modern people don't. They knew which foods stayed safe longer, which leftovers could be revived, and how to use heat to make borderline foods safer. Many carried a small tin can or pot that allowed them to boil questionable finds. In practical terms, you can use this principle by learning the difference between truly spoiled food and food that's simply cosmetically damaged. Study the basics of perishability, fermentation, and quick boiling. For backyard survival scenarios, the ability to make a safe meal from rough or overlooked materials is honestly an invaluable skill. Showing how hobos use social intelligence and coded systems to locate safe support. The famous hobo symbols weren't folklore. They were a real communication network. Chalk marks on fence posts, painted stones, or scratches on gates told passing wanderers whether a household was friendly, hostile, generous, suspicious, or willing to offer odd jobs. These symbols reduced risk dramatically. A hobo who could read the code avoided wasting effort and avoided danger. The application today isn't about marking houses. It's about understanding the power of reliable, discrete signalling within a community. For instance, in a preparedness group or homestead network, having pre-agreed signals about safe locations, water sources or danger zones can simplify coordination during emergencies. The hobos proved that low-tech communication doesn't mean unsophisticated. It means durable and dependable. Exploring how hobos repurposed discarded materials into functional gear. Everything had potential value to a Depression-era hobo. A piece of wire could become a pot handle. A scrap of canvas patched a coat. A broken crate became fuel or a cooking grate. Their scavenging style was defined by a multi-use mindset long before the term bushcraft even existed. Try this exercise to apply the method. Gather a box of random discards, tin cans, cloth scraps, wire, bottle caps and broken wood. And, challenge yourself to create 2 or 3 functional items. Build a small alcohol stove from a can-twist wire into hooks or turn cloth into char material. The point isn't to play crafts. It's to retrain your brain toward the Depression-era habit of seeing function in everything. Once you master this, real-life resource limitations won't intimidate you. Understanding how hobos leverage short-term labor to gain long-term resources. One of the cleverest scavenging tricks the hobos used was exchanging simple labor for food-safe rest areas or information. Sweeping a porch, chopping a small pile of wood, or cleaning a barn could secure not just a meal, but also a referral to another sympathetic household. Hobos weren't begging, they were negotiating. Work was currency. To use this principle today, practice micro-task exchanges. Offer labor or skills in exchange for materials or mentorship. It builds trust, strengthens community ties, and, it mirrors the Depression-era survival economy in a modern context. If this journey into the survival intelligence of Depression-era hobos gave you new respect for their resilience and resourcefulness, make sure you subscribe, share this video with fellow history enthusiasts, and stay tuned for more deep dives into practical wisdom from the past. Backyard wisdom is here to keep these forgotten skills alive.